Hello, my name is Mike. These are some bikes. Now in today's video, I'm not working on either one. You know, they're victories. They don't need a whole lot of work. Well, yeah, they do. They're like any other machine. Anyway, I digress, as I always do. This episode, we're back on the old rusty grenade. This episode, I'm going to attempt to make the wrong air conditioning system work in this car. And when I say wrong air conditioning system, what I really mean is, well, the wrong compressor, the wrong location there. See, the original 6-cylinder engine, the compressor is on this side, so all the hoses come over here instead of over there. So I got to figure out some way to get them to route. I see if I can bend this. If not, I may have to replace this accumulator so I can route the hose that way. I've got a lot of room at the back of the engine for hoses and such. And as far as the front hose goes, well, I think I'm going to have to route it down through here and then in front of the radiator and then back through here and kind of loop it back around. Kind of sort of like we did with the upper radiator hose. We got to double it back because right down there is where the high pressure line needs to connect to the condenser core. So that's kind of the idea. So stick around.
Somewhere in a dusty, dirty back alley in western Arizona, not far from historic Route 66, is an old fart trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. He'll work on anything, just as long as it's got at least 2 cool wheels. There was no way I was going to bend that tube without kinking it, so I headed to my favoriteest place of all, the self-service junkyard. Looking for Fox platform vehicles with a V8. This might be the one. That's the one. Rusty and crusty on the outside, moist and tender on the inside.
Well, back from the junkyard, found this little gem. It's a mid-80s-ish Mercury Cougar, which is also a Fox platform vehicle. But the big advantage, if you look at it, instead of tangled here. The hose going forwarder, it goes to the side, which is what we want. So all I need to do is, well, I can't use this hose. I'm going to use this hose, and I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to splice it into this end. That is if I don't, break something first. Anyway, that's part of it. Then we can get the low pressure side done. Then all we have to worry about is the high pressure side. Now all I have to do is go to the auto parts store and get some bulk AC hose. I think it's 1/2 inch diameter, and some hose clamps and some refrigerant. Should be in business. Nope, they only had 5/8 diameter. I need the smaller-ish stuff. I think it's 1/2 inch, 7/16. So I'll probably have to order it online. So yesterday I struck out, went to every auto parts store in town. Nobody had the AC bulk hose that I need to complete my project. One of the auto parts stores did have some, but it was the 5/8, not the 1/2 inch. I need the smaller diameter stuff. I went to several places that specialize in like hydraulic hoses and AC refrigerant lines and all that, and well, they were all closed, and this is a holiday weekend, so I'm going to have to wait a couple of days to hit those stores up again. But in the meantime, there's a couple of other things I can do. See, it kind of came to my attention that even though I installed this low pressure hose going from the compressor back to the accumulator, well, there's something missing. You see, someplace around here on the low pressure side, there needs to be a port so I can charge the system. Now, what I could do is, just take the pressure cycling switch off, put a port there, but then I wouldn't have a way to make sure that I got the right charge on it. So what I really need to do is I need to tie something in here. Now, the original hose that was on the car, this is the end that would have gone to the accumulator, and you can see there's a port there, charging port. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to, snip it off here and undo the swedge clamp here, and we're going to just splice this in line, and that should work. I got to figure out a way to kind of, rib this end a little bit so it grips the hose better, but that shouldn't be too hard to do. And then we've got a place to charge it on the low side. So that'll keep us occupied for a few minutes anyway. So there it is. I put a little bit of a flare in it, and I cut a little bit of a groove in it with the grinder, so that'll give two different diameter surfaces so that when I tighten the hose clamp down, it'll hold it. And then of course I cleaned it up real well, so it'll be a nice rubber to metal bond. That should hold up okay. It's, not quite as good as the factory setup, but we make do with what we've got. And there it is. Now I have a charge port and a low pressure line. It turned out pretty good. It looks like it belongs there. It looks like it came from the factory. No, it looks like somebody cobbled it. But as long as it's functional, I don't care how cobbly-ish it looks. Now, another thing I can do while I'm waiting for all the local refrigerant tube hose store places to open and try to finish my AC project, well, if you think back, if you've been watching my videos, you remember I bought a big pile of scrap parts from a diced and sliced Ford Mustang that somebody was selling online. The reason I bought the pile of scrap parts was because it included an 8.8 inch limited slip rear end. No, this isn't it. This is the one that came out of the car. But in a more recenter video, when I was, trying to get the transmission to work, realized I had a little problem. Yep, one of the axles in that rear end was bent. Now, you might ask, why don't I just take an axle out of the rear end I took out and put it in this one? Because I don't know if they'll fit. See, that one's a 7.3 inch, and the one that's in the car is now an 8.8 inch. I don't even know how many splines are on the axle shaft, because this rear end doesn't even have a tag. Now I do know that the one I took out, the 7.3 inch, whatever, ring gear rear end, has a 28 spline axle. So that's a given. So rather than me tear that one apart and tear this one apart and take the axle out and see if it fits, first I'm going to take the axle out of this one and count the splines. If it's not a 28 spline axle, I know the one coming out of the old one will not work and I'll have to hunt elsewhere. But at least I'll know how many splines I need. So I'm going to yank the axle out and just see what we got, and if we're lucky, we can take parts from the old one. If we're not lucky, which I'm usually not very lucky, we're going to hunt endlessly at junkyards. Alright, I've marked one spline. We'll count them and see. So put a little white dot there. We can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So that means I have the same number of splines as the differential that came out. So now that means I got no choice. I got to pull that cover off and pull one of the axles out of that one and see if it's, the same diameter or same length. But I do know it's the same number of splines, so there's a good chance I can use it. Well, I don't know. Look awfully close if they're not exactly the same. Diameter seems to be the same. How about the length? I don't know. You guys tell me. I mean, I'll find out when I go to cram it in there. Let me get a micrometer and measure where the bearing goes. But other than that, I'd say we got a win here. And we'll have one less wobbly wheel here in a minute. Well, I just measured them both, and they're both exactly the same, other than, the bend. Anyway, so that means I can use this one in this car. I'm really pretty happy. Saves me, carousing through a junkyard trying to find a rear axle. Just happen to have my own junkyard right here in my yard. There! No more wobble! I like it! And it only cost me a gasket and some lube! Us cheapskates like it when our spare parts work. Now that the long weekend was over, I headed over to the local hydraulic supply place, Burnell. Rumor has it, they've got air conditioning refrigeration hose. I was about to find out. Oh yeah. Alright, now that I've got the correct hose that I need, should be pretty straightforward. Go from the condenser core over here. I'm going to have to ride it behind the grill and over to the compressor there. So we'll get this put on and we'll flush the system a little bit and we'll put a vacuum on it and we'll put a charge on it. If all goes according to plan, which it rarely does, we'll have air conditioning. You know, for a car named the Rusty Grenade, it's got remarkably little, get on there, remarkably little rust in the battery tray area. Battery tray itself doesn't look half bad. I mean, it's just a little bit of surface stuff. I'll probably throw a little bit of black paint on it before I put it back in. So I tried to measure this. It's kind of hard to do, and thought I would need a little over 7 feet. I ended up buying 8 feet, so that way I could have bought 1 foot less and been just fine. But I couldn't have known that. I'd rather have too much than not enough. The problem is this stuff here is like 10 bucks a foot. It's not cheap. But I figure between the cost of the accumulator and the cost of the hose and all that, I'm into creating an AC system for like $148.62, something like that. And, you know, that's pretty cheap to have AC, so it's worth it. And then if I have a leaking hose that's really short sometime, I got a backup. So before I go ahead and clamp this, I'm going to go ahead and push a little refrigerant through it because pretty much every component in the system has been open to atmosphere for quite some time. So we want to push as much air, moisture, debris, and such out as we possibly can. So I'm going to pull this back off, and we'll just shoot a little can of juice through it. Just, you know, see if we can get some stuff out of it. So this is a new one on me. When I went to tighten this hose clamp, it got close to tightening and then it got stripped and then I couldn't back it off. So I had to cut the thing open. Whew, she's still hot. In order to try and remove it and put a good hose clamp on. And this is a name brand hose clamp. This is not a, you know, fly by night. Never had this happen before. It's ridiculous. Look at this. It's stuck to. Oh my goodness. Just can't get anything quality these days. Especially if you're a cheapskate like me. Whew. Alright, there, fixed. And that one tightened up, didn't strip out. So now, we're gonna put a vacuum on it, evacuate the system, and then we'll give it a shot of R134A and see if it gets cold. So if you guys aren't familiar with this system, it's an evacuation pump that actually uses air pressure to create a vacuum. There's like a venturi in there, and it uses compressed air rather than an electric motor. It works well, it's just noisier than heck. The compressor's running, that thing hisses, but it does the job. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. As you can see, the AC is working great. The real test will be time. In other words, how long will all my cobbled up refrigerant hose connections hold up? Will they seep? Will they leak? Or will they simply explode, sending refrigerant oil all over the place? I hope it's not the latter. And if it is leaking a little bit, well, we can get more differenter clamps and stuff and try to isolate those leaks. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, or, turn the TV off, whatever. And come on back for the next episode. I have no idea what it's going to be about. Probably another motorcycle. Haven't done one of those in a while, have I?